Yesterday, my home state of Louisiana joined the growing list of states that have passed laws for universal school choice, an option for parents that has grown in support, especially since COVID-induced school closures and Zoom classrooms. As more parents demand school choice, one educational option they're choosing is to homeschool their children, one I fully endorse. But the rise in parents stewarding their own children's education has led to a backlash from the left. Recently, the editors of the Scientific American magazine called for the federal government, which typically leaves education issues to the states, to seize control and implement federal standards for homeschool students. So why is the left so threatened by parents leading their children's education? And how should those who support homeschool education respond to these threats? Joining me now to discuss this is Mike Farris. He founded the Homeschool Legal Defense Association more than 40 years ago, which was instrumental in legalizing homeschooling in all 50 states. He currently serves as the National Religious Broadcasters General Counsel. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
It's great to see you, Tony. Thank you so much.
So let me just start with this, your reaction to the unsigned editorial from the Scientific American.
Well, the editors of the Scientific American need a basic course in constitutional law. I've done one, and I'd be glad to send them a copy for free so that they can learn. The federal government has no jurisdiction to implement the kind of plan that they are calling for, a very draconian plan. And on top of the fact that they're asking for something that is, if it's at all within the government's jurisdiction, it's within the states, not the federal government. But their motive and their operational plan apparently would be just on its face unconstitutional. One of the things they cite as a reason for needing this is they point to the fact that homeschoolers, in large part, teach their kids about creation as opposed to evolution.
Right.
And so that is something clearly that people have the right to do. And the fact that that's what motivates them shows how bigoted they really are. I mean, on top of the homeschooling issues, that they would have to, by the same token, go after a lot of private schools. Many good Christian schools teach the same principles as homeschoolers do. That God created the world. Yes.
When you read this opinion piece, it as you just pointed out, it clearly lacks any constitutional foundation for what they're asserting. It's almost laughable. One of the things they call for, and this is an example that they give, is that this is what they would like to see the federal government do, is that, for example, and I'm quoting, for example, homeschool parents should be required to pass an initial background check, as every state requires of all K through 12 teachers. A background check to teach your own children?
Yeah, it is amazing. You know, you could have them for all the rest of the day, but if you want to teach them about math and reading and science and the Bible, then you have to have a background check. It just doesn't make any sense. They do call for regulations, partly because of some cases where there have been people claiming to homeschool, have been found out to abuse and sometimes seriously abuse their children. The reality is, in the vast majority of cases like this over the last 40 years as I worked on these kinds of cases, the government officials knew about the problems with the family long before there was ever any claim to be a homeschooling family. The homeschooling family claim is just a pretense in the vast majority of these cases. And they use that, the officials use that as a cover-up for the fact that they failed to do any reasonable inquiry into the family when they first found out about the problems. And so, you know, if you're going to say, if there's abuse in the situation, we need to have federal regulation of the schools, then the federal government needs to take over the public schools of this country, because the number of cases of sexual abuse of children by public school teachers dwarfs the number of any claim relative to homeschooling, just in sheer volume of numbers.
Right.
It's just far greater. And that's just you know, it doesn't equate. That still remains a proper state issue. The state officials need to prosecute those teachers that do those
I mean,
kind of criminal activities, not the federal government.
we're not calling for the closure of all public schools because of the abuse that takes place in public school settings. Of course, that's not stopping them from calling for the federal government to regulate, with the goal, I think, of basically making homeschooling the requirements so onerous that parents won't do it. But they also point to educational standards, and this is where I think, again, it's laughable when they say, well, you know, these kids are being educationally deprived, but have you looked at the test scores from the public schools in the last few years? I mean, last year was the lowest in decades in math and reading.
And years ago, when I first came to Washington in the mid-'80s, Albert Shanker was the head of the American Federation of Teachers, testified in a presidential hearing that was held in the Senate office buildings that the average public high school graduate is functionally illiterate, cannot rank order 7 common fractions and do other basic math skills, cannot write a basic paragraph of a business letter. Now, this is the head of the second largest teachers union in the country, 40 years ago, saying the public schools were failing the public school graduates. It's not gotten better in the last 40 years. The reality is homeschooling works very, very well. People say that the test scores are not conclusive. They're conclusive of this, that homeschooling performs adequately. That's absolutely conclusive. I think that the test scores also show that homeschooling is the best form of education. Now, there's more debate that could be raised about that claim, but we don't have to prove that we're the best. We just have to prove that we're at least as good as the public schools. And that claim is we walk away with that without any question whatsoever.
I mean, given the woke ideology that's invaded schools today, I think you give your kid a Dr. Seuss book and put them out underneath a tree in the front yard, and it will come out better than the public school system. But at the bottom line of this, Mike Farris, is it's a clash of worldviews.
Exactly.
What we see happening is this antagonism, hatred for a biblical worldview, which, as you pointed out, came out in this piece about the teaching of creationism.
That's really it. I mean, the people like Elizabeth Bartlett at Harvard, a law professor there, other law professors at Emory, at George Washington, at Northwestern in Chicago, have all made similar calls. They haven't asked for federal regulation. Most of them have asked for outright banning of homeschooling. And the reason that they give is the worldview reason. They want all children in America to be indoctrinated in their worldview, not the parents' worldview. And as an article I wrote in the Peabody Journal of Education that's published by Vanderbilt University, I point out that their parallel is the old Oregon law in the 1920s that banned all private schooling, sponsored by the Ku Klux Klan, as well as the practices of Nazi Germany that banned all private schooling, both homeschooling and parochial or private schools. That the intellectual foundation that these leftist progressives stand on is the Ku Klux Klan and the Third Reich. That's not very good territory. And the UN conventions are not something that I believe should ever be applied to the United States, but it's an interesting comparison here. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights say that parents have the prior right to decide what kind of school that they want for their children, for the very reason so that their moral foundation will match the parents, not the government. And they did that in response to Nazi Germany. Yet we have progressives matching the philosophy of Nazi Germany in an apparent irony that really needs to be pointed out to them.
Mike Farris, I want to transition to discussing, not just the legal aspects and the attacks on homeschooling, but I mean, you've been a champion for homeschooling for 40 years, homeschooled your kids. I'm an advocate of homeschooling. I worked with Homeschool Legal Defense when I was in the legislature to advance protections in my home state of Louisiana. You guys have always done great work. Let's talk about the practical benefits for families and for kids when their parents take that type of make that type of investment in their education by homeschooling them.
Well, the reason Vicki and I started homeschooling in 1983 is that we heard and read this truth. Children get their values from whoever they spend the majority of their time with. Now, our kids are not cookie cutters of either Vicki or I in any respect, but they share all of our core values about God, about the Bible, about America, about freedom, about the principles of protecting human life. We've effectively transmitted our values to our kids, and they've turned out just fine academically. One son has a PhD in biology and genetics from Notre Dame. Another son is about to get his PhD in nuclear physics from Michigan State. He's about a year away from that. Other kids have graduated with high honors from their colleges. Others didn't go to college, and they're doing just great in many other fields. And so we have seen our kids turn out really well. We have a very close family. We have consistent values. We have high academic achievement. I can't ask for anything better, and it's just the best thing we ever did for our family.
I echo that. I want to get you to elaborate just a moment on something you just said kind of in passing. Our family's close. I have found, experienced ourselves, homeschool families are close. And when we talk about close, they stick together, and it's not like they don't have outside relationships. They do, but there's a bond that takes place through that process of learning about life together.
Indeed. I mean, our family was very busy after 3 o'clock, just like any other normal family. Our kids played sports, they were in Awanas, they ballet, they did all kinds of things. But we spent the day together every day, day after day, year after year. And then, of course, normal family times at dinner and on the weekends and at church on Sunday. All those things add up over time. And quality time with your kids is a good idea. Quantity time is even better. And the result of quantity time is closeness. And it's just a wonderful experience. And you know, we have kids getting married. We have 30 grandkids. We have one great grandchild, and our grandkids have all been homeschooled. Some of them went to the public school to play sports in high school, but they were all homeschooled the vast majority of their education, and it's just a terrific experience, and we are indeed very close.
Final question for you, Mike Farris. Going back to this attack, it's not new. I mean, this has been out there. It's perpetual. It's every year. We're saying it's perennial. But what do we need to do to make sure we don't lose this God-given right to teach our own children?
Well, homeschoolers need to stay nimble and organized. I would encourage families to continue to join Homeschool Legal Defense Association. We are there to help families. I'm not employed there anymore, but I'm still the chairman of the board, have been for 43 years. We are there to protect their legal rights, both in courts and the legislatures. They also need to stay a part of their state homeschool organizations. That's how we won the freedom. That's how we'll maintain it, is by being organized and nimble and ready to act. The other thing I would say, the vast majority of Americans now have an affinity toward homeschooling because of the COVID situation. Every family feels to some extent or another that they kind of homeschooled their children during the COVID period of time, at least for a little while. Maybe not in a traditional sense, but they at least feel akin to homeschoolers. And so the political advancement that comes from that situation where families feel like these are good people, they're doing good things for their kids. And I believe that a lot of families who might have freaked out because of keeping their public school kids at home during that period of time, they looked at homeschoolers and said, well, their kids turn out okay, so I think our kids might turn out okay as well. We brought that kind of assurance and affinity, and that's politically very important. I think we're in a really strong position. We just got to keep putting the pedal to the metal and not letting any lackadaisical spirit come in. We got to defend our liberty day in, day out.
Great advice, Mike Farris. Always great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today, and thank you for all you've done for our country, in particular for the families when it comes to homeschooling.
Well, thank you so much, Tony.